I stood at his door at midnight, my voice trembling, but my eyes filled with desperation. If I don't have a baby, I'll lose everything. Caleb Thompson had buried his wife 3 years ago. He raised his daughter alone in his small house in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, filled with memories and wounds that never fully healed. He didn't ask why I needed a child, he just looked straight at me and said something that made me freeze. If you want my help, you'll have to accept my condition tonight, but was that condition salvation or a mistake I could never undo? The living room was dark except for the pale glow of a single lamp. Caleb Thompson sat in his worn leather chair, the one his wife had picked out 7 years ago at a garage sale. In his hands, he held a photograph. Rachel's smile looked back at him, frozen in time, captured on their last anniversary before the accident took her away. 3 years. It had been 3 years since that phone call. 3 years since he rushed to the hospital only to find her already gone. 3 years of raising their daughter alone, of learning to braid hair and pack lunches and answer questions about why mommy lived in heaven. Now down the hall, 6-year-old Lily slept peacefully, clutching the teddy bear Rachel had given her on her 3rd birthday. It was the last gift her mother ever gave her, and the child refused to sleep without it. The doorbell shattered the silence. Caleb glanced at the clock on the wall. Past midnight. Nobody came to his door at this hour. His neighbors knew better. His family lived 2 states away. For a moment he considered ignoring it, but the bell rang again, more urgent this time. He set down the photograph and walked to the door. The woman standing on his porch looked nothing like he remembered, yet he recognized me instantly. 4 years ago, he had found me stranded on a back road outside Philadelphia, my luxury sedan smoking from under the hood. I had been dressed in an expensive suit then, too, but my composure had been intact. Now my designer clothes were wrinkled, my eyes red and swollen, my hands trembling at my sides. "Paige Carter," he said quietly. I seemed surprised that he remembered my name. Back then, I had offered him money for his help. He had refused, simply called a tow truck and waited with me until it arrived. I had given him my business card, told him to call if he ever needed anything. He never did. "I need your help," I said, and my voice cracked on the last word. Caleb studied my face. Whatever had brought me here, it had broken something inside me. He stepped aside and let me in. I walked into his living room and looked around at the modest furniture, the children's drawings taped to the refrigerator visible through the kitchen doorway, the toys scattered in a basket by the couch. This was not my world. Everything about me screamed wealth and power, from my diamond earrings to my Italian leather shoes. Yet here I stood in his small house in Cherry Hill, looking more lost than anyone he had ever seen. "Sit down," he said. "Tell me what's going on." I lowered myself onto the edge of his couch, my back straight, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. I took a breath, then another, as if gathering the courage to speak. "My father died 2 months ago." Caleb nodded slowly. "Victor Carter." He had seen the news. The man had built one of the largest real estate empires on the East Coast before cancer claimed him. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Don't be." My voice turned bitter. He wasn't sorry for anything he did to me while he was alive. I looked up at him, and in my eyes he saw something raw and desperate. "His will has a condition. I only inherit the company if I have a biological child with a legal father on record before my 35th birthday. I let out a hollow laugh. "I have 11 months. 11 months to do something I spent my entire adult life avoiding." Caleb remained standing, his arms crossed over his chest. "Why come to me? Because you're the only man I've ever met who didn't want anything from me." I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder. "I've thought about this carefully. Anonymous donors won't work. The will specifically requires a legal father. I can't trust anyone in my circle. They would use it against me. Demand shares. Leverage it for power." I opened the folder and slid a document across the coffee table toward him. $500,000. "You would be listed as the father on the birth certificate. Once the legal requirements are satisfied and I secure my inheritance, you can walk away. No obligations, no responsibilities, no contact if that's what you prefer." Clean and simple. Caleb didn't look at the papers. He kept his eyes fixed on my face. You think I would sell my child? I flinched. It wouldn't be like that. It would be a business arrangement. The child would be mine. You would simply be a sperm donor with a signature. The words hung in the air between us. My composure cracked further, and for a moment I looked like I might cry. You don't understand. If I don't do this, my cousin Derek takes everything. Every building I developed, every deal I closed, every 18-hour day I worked to prove I deserved my place at that table. Gone. All of it. Given to a man who has done nothing but wait for me to fail. I stood up abruptly, my voice rising. I have spent my entire life trying to be good enough. Good enough for my father, good enough for the board, good enough to matter. And now, even from the grave, he's telling me I'm not. That without a child, everything I've built means nothing. Caleb watched me fall apart in his living room. He thought about Rachel, about how she used to say everyone carried invisible wounds. He thought about Lily, asleep down the hall, unaware that her father was standing at a crossroads. The answer is no. My face crumpled. Please, I'll double the amount. $1 million, whatever you want. What kind of man do you think I am? I had no answer for that. Caleb walked to the hallway and looked toward his daughter's bedroom door. The nightlight glowed softly underneath it. He thought about the day Lily was born, how Rachel had held her and cried with joy. He thought about the promise he made at his wife's funeral, that he would protect their daughter from a world that could be cruel and cold. Then he thought about the woman behind him, the woman who had everything except the one thing she needed, the woman who had come to him because 4 years ago he had shown her simple kindness without asking for anything in return. He turned back to face me. I won't give you a child like it's a transaction. My shoulders sagged in defeat. I reached for the folder, ready to leave. But, Caleb continued, and I froze. If you really want my help, you'll have to accept my condition tonight. Hope flickered in my eyes, mixed with fear. What condition? You move in here. You live in this house with me and my daughter. You learn what it means to be part of a family. A real family, not some arrangement on paper. He held my gaze. I won't bring a child into this world just to have its mother disappear. My daughter already lost her mother. I won't let another child be born into something worse. I stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language. You want me to live here in this house for 3 months? After that, if you still want to have a child with me, we'll talk, but not before and not for money. I don't understand. What do you get out of this? Caleb picked up the photograph of Rachel from the side table. He looked at it for a long moment before answering. My wife believed that everyone deserves a chance to know what love feels like. Real love. The kind that doesn't come with conditions or contracts. He set the photo down gently. Maybe I'm a fool, but I'd rather be a fool than a man who sells his future child to a stranger. I stood in the middle of his living room, caught between the life I knew and something completely unknown. Every instinct told me to walk away, to find another solution, any other solution. But there was no other solution. I had spent weeks searching, planning, calculating. Every path led to a dead end. Every man I considered came with strings attached, except this one. 3 months, I whispered. 3 months. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, something had shifted in my expression. Resignation, perhaps, or the faintest glimmer of something I couldn't name. Fine, I accept your condition. Caleb nodded once. There's a guest room down the hall. We'll figure out the rest in the morning. As I walked past him toward the hallway, I stopped. Why are you doing this? Really? Caleb looked toward Lily's door again. Because my daughter still asks if her mother is coming back, and I never want another child to grow up asking that question. Morning light filtered through unfamiliar curtains. I awoke in the small guest room, disoriented for a moment before the previous night came rushing back. The desperate drive across town, the confession, the impossible condition I had accepted. I sat up and looked around. The room was simple but clean. A wooden dresser, a small closet, a window overlooking a modest backyard. On the nightstand sat glass of water that had not been there when I fell asleep. Someone had checked on me during the night. The smell of bacon drifted under the door. I found Caleb in the kitchen, standing over the stove while Lily sat at the table, swinging her legs and chattering about a dream she had. The child stopped mid-sentence when she noticed the stranger in the doorway. "Daddy, who is that?" Caleb flipped a pancake before answering. "This is Miss Page. She's going to be staying with us for a while." Lily studied me with the unfiltered curiosity only children possess. "Are you Daddy's new girlfriend?" Lily. Caleb's voice carried a gentle warning. "I'm just asking." The girl turned back to me. "My friend Lily's mom has a boyfriend. He brings her flowers sometimes." "Are you going to bring Daddy flowers?" I had negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts. I had faced hostile boardrooms and ruthless competitors. But standing in this kitchen, being interrogated by a 6-year-old, I found myself completely unprepared. "I'm a guest," I finally said. "Just a guest." Lily seemed to accept this answer, at least for now. She returned her attention to her pancakes while Caleb set an extra plate on the table and nodded toward an empty chair. Breakfast was a strange affair. I picked at my food while Lily dominated the conversation with stories about her teacher, her best friend, and a caterpillar she had found on the playground. Caleb listened with patient attention, asking questions, laughing at the right moments. This was their routine, I realized. This was their life. After breakfast, Caleb handed me a dish towel. "Everyone contributes in this house." I stared at the towel as if he had handed me something foreign. In my penthouse apartment in Philadelphia, a cleaning service came 3 times a week. I could not remember the last time I had washed a dish, but Caleb was already scrubbing a pan, and Lily was putting her plate in the sink, and there was nothing to do but dry. The first week tested everything I thought I knew about myself. My designer clothes looked absurd in this house. My high heels clicked too loudly on the worn hardwood floors. My phone rang constantly with calls from the office, from lawyers, from board members demanding my attention, and I found myself stepping outside to take them, pacing the small front porch while inside, a life carried on without me. Caleb went to work each morning at a construction company downtown in Philadelphia. He returned each evening, tired but present, immediately devoting his attention to Lily. Homework, dinner, bath time, bedtime stories. The rhythm of his days revolved entirely around his daughter. I watched from the edges, unsure where I fit. "You could read to her tonight," Caleb said one evening, nodding toward Lily's bedroom. "She likes the one about the princess and the dragon. I don't know how to read to children. You open the book, you read the words, she'll tell you if you're doing it wrong." It was not a suggestion. I walked down the hall, feeling like I was approaching a business presentation I had not prepared for. Lily was already in bed, the teddy bear tucked under her arm, her eyes bright with expectation. "Daddy said you're going to read tonight." "That's right. Do you know how to do the voices?" I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the book. "What voices?" "Daddy does voices. The dragon has a deep voice, and the princess has a brave voice, and the king has a silly voice because he's not very smart." I looked at the words on the page. I thought about all the presentations I had given, all the speeches I had memorized, all the personas I had crafted to survive in my world. I gave the dragon a deep voice. I gave the princess a brave voice. And when the king appeared, I made him so ridiculous that Lily burst into giggles. "You're good at this," the child said when the story ended. I closed the book. For a moment, something warm flickered in my chest, something I did not recognize. "Good night, Lily." "Good night, Miss Page." The girl was already drifting off, still smiling. In the hallway, Caleb was waiting. She liked the voices. I said she would. We stood there in the dim light. 2 people from different worlds, bound by an agreement neither fully understood. 2 weeks in, I awoke to screaming. I was out of bed before I fully registered what was happening, running toward the sound. Lily's door was open, and inside the child was sitting up in bed, tears streaming down her face, crying for her mother. Caleb was not there. Water was running in the bathroom down the hall. I stood frozen in the doorway. I should wait for Caleb. I had no idea what to do with a crying child. This was not my responsibility, not my place, but Lily looked so small, so terrified, clutching that worn teddy bear like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to the world. I walked to the bed and sat down. I had a bad dream, Lily sobbed. I saw Mommy, but she was walking away and I couldn't catch her and she didn't hear me calling. My throat tightened. I knew that dream. I had lived that dream 30 years ago, watching my own mother's back disappear through a doorway. I'm here, I heard myself say. I'm right here. I did not know what else to offer, but I stayed. I sat on the edge of that small bed while Lily's sobs slowly quieted, while the child's grip on her teddy bear relaxed, while exhaustion pulled her back toward sleep. Will you stay until I fall asleep? Lily whispered. Yes. I stayed until the child's breathing grew deep and even. I stayed longer still, looking at this little girl who had lost so much, who still had nightmares about the mother she could barely remember. For the first time in my life, I felt needed for something other than my name or my money or my power. 1 month passed. I learned to cook simple meals, nothing elaborate, but enough to contribute to dinner. I learned which grocery store Caleb preferred and how Lily liked her sandwiches cut. I learned the sound of the house settling at night, the way the kitchen faucet dripped if you did not turn it hard enough, the particular creak of the third step on the front porch. I was still working, still fielding calls and reviewing contracts, but the pull of that other life grew weaker with each passing day. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, I found Caleb sitting on the back porch, staring at the stars. I hesitated, then sat down beside him. Can I ask you something? I said. Caleb nodded. What was she like, Rachel? He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. She was light. That's the only way I can describe it. When she walked into a room, everything got brighter. She could make anyone laugh, even me, and I'm not exactly known for my sense of humor. I smiled slightly. I noticed she died on her way to pick up Lily from school. Some kid ran a red light texting on his phone. Rachel never had a chance. Caleb's jaw tightened. I was working overtime that day, trying to finish a project. I should have been the one to pick Lily up. If I had just left on time, that wasn't your fault. I know. He looked down at his hands, but knowing something and feeling it are different things. We sat in silence as the night deepened around us. I thought about my own guilt, my own grief, the wound my mother had left when she walked away. My mother left when I was 7, I said quietly. Just packed a bag one morning and walked out the door. My father never explained why. He just said I needed to be better, to be stronger, to be someone worth staying for. Caleb turned to look at me. I spent my whole life trying to be that person. I continued. Every promotion, every deal, every success. I thought if I achieved enough, I would finally be enough. But it was never true. He's dead now, and he's still making me prove myself. Paige, Caleb said my name gently, the first time without the distance he usually maintained. It wasn't your fault either. Children don't make their parents leave. I felt tears burn behind my eyes. No one had ever said that to me, not once in 30 years. The second month brought storms. My phone rang incessantly now. Derek had been busy. He had hired investigators, called in favors, spread rumors through the board about the CEO living in scandal with an unknown man. My lawyer sent increasingly urgent messages. The situation was deteriorating. I started leaving early, coming home late. Dinners were missed. Bedtime stories became sporadic. The fragile rhythm I had built began to fracture. Miss Page doesn't like being here anymore, does she, Daddy? Lily asked one night when I was not home yet. Caleb had no answer that would not be a lie. When I finally walked through the door that evening, exhausted and tense, I found Caleb waiting in the living room. Lily was already asleep. We need to talk, he said. It's been a long day, Caleb. Can it wait? No. I set down my bag, sensing the confrontation coming. You're turning this into a hotel, Caleb said. You come, you go. You treat this place like a temporary stop on your way somewhere more important. I'm trying to save everything I've worked for. You know what's at stake? I know what you think is at stake. But what about what's happening here? Lily asked me tonight if you were leaving. She's gotten attached to you, Paige, and now she's scared you're going to disappear like her mother did. The words hit me harder than I expected. I never asked her to get attached to me. That's how it works with children. They don't ask permission, they just love. My defenses crumbled. I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands. I don't know how to do this, any of it. I wasn't built for this kind of life. Caleb sat down across from me. Maybe that's the problem. You keep thinking you have to be built for something. Maybe you just have to be present for it. Later that night, I sat alone in my room, tears falling silently. A soft knock came at my door. Lily stood in the hallway holding a piece of paper. I made this for you, the child said, so you won't be sad. I took the drawing, 3 figures holding hands rendered in crayon. A tall man, a small girl with pigtails, and a woman with long hair and a red dress. That's us, Lily explained. That's our family. I could not speak. I pulled the child into a hug, holding on like I was afraid to let go. The call came on a Friday morning. Derek had convened an emergency board meeting. He had presented evidence of my living arrangement, framing it as instability, as scandal, as proof that I was unfit to lead the company my father had built. The board had given me 3 weeks to demonstrate that my relationship was legitimate and stable, or they would vote to remove me as CEO immediately, bypassing the inheritance deadline entirely. I drove home in a daze. By the time I walked through the door, I had made a decision. Caleb was in the kitchen when I found him. "Marry me," I said. He turned confused. "What, on paper?" "Just legally. It would solve everything. The board would back off, Derek would lose his leverage, and I could. I was talking too fast, the words tumbling out. "I'll pay you double what I originally offered. $1 million. You wouldn't have to do anything. Just sign the papers and stop." The single word cut through my spiral. Listen to yourself. Caleb's voice was cold in a way I had never heard. After everything, after 2 months of living here, of being part of this family, you still think money can buy your way out. That's exactly what you mean. You're standing in my kitchen offering to pay me to marry you. Like I'm a contractor you can hire for a job. I'm desperate, Caleb. I don't know what else to do. Then figure it out without using me and my daughter as props in your business strategy. He stepped back from me, creating distance. I thought you were different. I thought you were starting to understand. But you're still the same woman who showed up at my door trying to buy a baby. The words felt like a slap. Something defensive rose up in me. Something sharp and wounded. What do you want from me? To give up everything I've worked for. To become some kind of housewife playing pretend in your little world. My voice shook. I wasn't born into this life, Caleb. I don't belong here. I never did. Caleb's expression went flat. Then maybe you should go back to the life you do belong to. I stood there, chest heaving, tears threatening to spill. I wanted to take the words back. I wanted to explain that I did not mean them, that I was scared and cornered and lashing out at the only person who had shown me kindness. But pride had always been my armor, and I could not make myself remove it. I grabbed my bag and walked toward the door. Paige, Caleb's voice stopped me. I turned, hoping he would ask me to stay. "Lily will ask where you went," he said quietly. What should I tell her? I had no answer. I opened the door and walked out into the night. Behind me, I heard small footsteps running down the hall. "Daddy," Lily's voice was confused, frightened. "Where is Miss Page going? Is she coming back?" Caleb watched the taillights disappear around the corner. His daughter tugged at his sleeve, waiting for an answer he could not give. "I don't know, baby," he finally said. "I don't know." The penthouse had never felt so empty. I stood in the center of my living room, surrounded by expensive furniture and contemporary art and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Philadelphia skyline. Everything was exactly as I had left it 2 months ago. The cleaning service had maintained it perfectly, not a speck of dust, not a cushion out of place. It felt like a museum, a monument to a life I no longer recognized as my own. I dropped my bag on the pristine white couch and walked to the window. The city glittered below, indifferent to my pain. Somewhere out there, Derek was probably celebrating. The board meeting was in less than 3 weeks. Without proof of a stable relationship, without a marriage certificate or a pregnancy, I would lose everything. But standing here in the cold silence of my perfect apartment, I could not bring myself to care. I reached into my bag and pulled out the only thing I had taken from Caleb's house, the drawing. 3 figures holding hands, a family Lily had imagined into existence with crayons and hope. I traced the outline of the woman in the red dress. I thought about the nights spent reading bedtime stories, giving the dragon a deep voice and the princess a brave one. I thought about sitting on the edge of a small bed while a frightened child held my hand in the darkness. I thought about the back porch and the stars, and the first time anyone had told me that my mother leaving was not my fault. For 30 years, I had been running toward success, toward validation, toward some imaginary finish line where my father would finally say I was enough. But Victor Carter was dead, and the finish line had never existed, and I had spent my entire life chasing a ghost. The tears came then, quiet and unstoppable. I cried for the little girl who had watched her mother walk away. I cried for the woman who had built an empire on a foundation of pain. I cried for the family I had found and destroyed in the same breath. When the tears finally stopped, something had shifted inside me. The weight I had carried for so long felt different now, not lighter but clearer. I understood finally what it had been pressing me toward. The next morning, I walked into my lawyer's office. David Morrison had represented the Carter family for 20 years. He had handled my father's estate, drafted the will that now hung over my head, and spent the last 2 months trying to help me find a way to satisfy its impossible conditions. He looked up from his desk as I entered, surprise evident on his face. "Paige, I wasn't expecting you. Has something changed with the board situation?" I sat down across from him and placed a folder on his desk. "I want you to draw up papers relinquishing my claim to the inheritance." David stared at me as if I had spoken in another language. "I'm sorry." "What?" "I'm giving it up. The company, the properties, everything covered under my father's will. I want to sign it over." "Paige, do you understand what you're saying? We're talking about an estate worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Everything your father built, everything you helped build, you would be handing it to Derek on a silver platter." "I understand." "Then help me understand why." I looked out the window at the city below. The same view I had seen from my penthouse, but different somehow, smaller. My father spent his whole life building something, and when he died, he used that something to control me one last time, to tell me that without a child, without a family on his terms, I was worthless. I turned back to David. I spent 2 months living in a small house with a man and his daughter. I learned to cook. I read bedtime stories. I held a little girl while she cried for her mother. My voice softened, and I realized that the life I was so desperate to hold on to was never really mine. It was my father's life, his vision, his legacy, his definition of success. I was just the vessel he expected to carry it forward. David leaned back in his chair, studying me with the careful attention of a man who had seen many things in his long career. "And what will you do instead?" I smiled, and it felt genuine in a way I had not experienced in years. "I don't know yet, but for the first time, it will be my choice." 3 days later, I drove back to the small house in Cherry Hill. I had not called ahead. I did not know what I would say or if Caleb would even let me through the door, but I knew I had to try. Not for the company, not for the inheritance, not for any condition or contract. Just because it was the only thing that felt true. Caleb opened the door and found me standing on his porch. I wore jeans and a simple blouse, clothes I had bought at a regular store for the first time in years. My hair was pulled back in a ponytail. I looked younger somehow, or maybe just less burdened. Paige, His voice was guarded, careful. "I'm not here to ask you to save the company," I said quickly before he could close the door. "I signed the papers 3 days ago. I gave up the inheritance, all of it." Caleb's expression shifted from guarded to confused. "Why would you do that?" "Because you were right about everything." I took a breath, steadying myself. "I came to you 2 months ago because I needed something. A baby, a signature, a solution to a problem. I treated you like a means to an end, and when things got hard, I tried to do it again." I stepped closer, my eyes holding his. But somewhere in the middle of all that, something changed. I stopped thinking about what I needed and started thinking about what I wanted. And what I want is to be here with you and Lily. Not because of a deadline or a will or a business arrangement, just because this is where I feel like myself for the first time in my life. Caleb did not respond immediately. He looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the war playing out behind his eyes, the fear of being hurt again, the memory of watching me walk away. The hope he was afraid to feel. "I pushed you away," he finally said. "That night when you offered the marriage arrangement, I knew you were desperate and scared, and instead of helping you, I shut you out. I've been doing that for 3 years, pushing people away before they can leave me, just like Rachel did." He shook his head slowly. "It wasn't fair to you, and it wasn't fair to Lily, who spent the last 3 days asking when you were coming back." My heart clenched. "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth, that grown-ups make mistakes and sometimes they need time to figure out how to fix them." We stood there on the porch, two people who had hurt each other, who had found each other, who were still learning what any of it meant. "I have one more condition," Caleb said. I braced myself. "Don't stay because you have nowhere else to go. Don't stay because you gave up the company and this is what's left. Stay because you want this life, this house, this family, all the messy, ordinary, difficult parts of it." His voice was thick with emotion. "Can you do that?" I felt tears sliding down my cheeks, but I was smiling. "I don't know if I'll be good at it," I admitted. "I've never had a real family. I don't know how to be a mother or a partner or any of the things you need me to be." Caleb reached out and took my hand. "Neither do I. Rachel and I were figuring it out together when she died. I've been figuring it out alone ever since." He squeezed my fingers gently. "Maybe we can figure it out together." The front door burst open and Lily came running out. "Miss Page!" The child launched herself at my legs, hugging me fiercely. "You came back. I knew you would come back. Daddy said grown-ups make mistakes, but you were gonna fix it." I knelt down and wrapped my arms around the little girl, holding her tight. "I'm sorry I left," I whispered. "I won't do it again." Lily pulled back and looked at me with serious eyes. "Promise?" "I promise." 1 year later, the small house in Cherry Hill looked almost the same. The same worn furniture, the same children's drawings on the refrigerator, the same creak in the third step of the porch. But there was more laughter now, more noise, more life filling the spaces that had once been so quiet. I had started my own real estate development company, a small operation focused on affordable housing. It would never make me a billionaire, but I had built it with my own hands, on my own terms, and that meant more than any inheritance ever could. Caleb still worked as an engineer, but he no longer took overtime shifts. He came home every evening at the same time, and the three of us ate dinner together at the small kitchen table. Lily had stopped calling me Miss Page months ago. Now she used a different name, one she had chosen herself, Mommy Page, come look. I walked out to the back porch where Lily sat with her crayons and paper, creating another masterpiece. Caleb was already there, sitting in his usual chair, watching our daughter with quiet contentment. "What did you draw, sweetheart?" Lily held up the paper proudly. 4 figures this time standing in front of a house, Caleb with his broad shoulders, Lily with her pigtails, me in my red dress, and between us a very small figure with a round belly and stick arms. "That's the baby," Lily announced. "When is the baby coming?" Caleb and I exchanged a look. The question hung in the air, full of possibility. "When we're ready," I said carefully. Caleb took my hand and pulled me down to sit beside him on the porch swing. "Maybe," he said softly, so only I could hear, "We're already ready." I leaned into him, looking out at the backyard where Lily had returned to her drawing, adding flowers and a son and a dog we did not have yet, but would probably get someday. This was not the life I had planned. It was not the life my father had designed for me. It was smaller, simpler, and infinitely more precious than anything I could have imagined. "Yeah," I whispered back, "maybe we are." I never imagined that one desperate midnight knock on a stranger's door in Cherry Hill would end up teaching me the most powerful lesson of my life, but here I am, a year later, holding Caleb's hand on our back porch while Lily draws pictures of our growing family, and my heart feels fuller than any boardroom victory ever could. I used to believe success was everything, that if I just worked harder, earned more, and proved myself to a father who was long gone, I'd finally be enough. I showed up at Caleb's house ready to buy a baby, like it was just another business deal, desperate to save an empire I thought defined me. But living in that modest little home, learning to dry dishes after dinner, reading bedtime stories with silly dragon voices, and sitting through a 6-year-old's nightmares until she fell asleep in my arms, I discovered something that shattered every wall I'd built. Real love isn't a transaction or a trophy you chase. It's the quiet choice to stay, to be present, and to let someone see the broken parts of you without walking away. Giving up that inheritance felt like losing everything at first, yet it freed me to gain what truly matters. A family that loves me not for what I achieve, but simply because I'm there, messy and real. Caleb showed me that healing old wounds, my mother's abandonment, his grief over Rachel, happens in the ordinary moments when you stop running and start belonging. No amount of money could buy the way Lily calls me Mommy Page, or the peace I feel when Caleb whispers that we're already ready for whatever comes next. If this story wrapped itself around your heart the way it did mine, drop a comment below and tell me, what's one lesson life taught you about choosing real love over everything else? And if these heartfelt tales move you, hit that subscribe button right now, turn on notifications, and join our family here, because your support keeps these stories alive, and I can't wait to share the next one with you.